I want to talk a bit today about hearing voices. Have you been hearing any voices lately? If you were, I'm sure you wouldn't admit it. You might get sent off somewhere. The reality is, though, that we all tune into different voices, do we not? And these voices greatly influence how we think, what we believe, the decisions we make, and ultimately the outcome of our lives. Today, I'm going to talk about 3 voices that shape so much of our human experience. And I want to say from the outset that all of these voices have a role to play, but not all of them have an equally important role. And it's so critical that we get that. The first voice we might call the voice of outsiders. Family, friends, colleagues, the culture around us, the norms of society, the groups that we're a part of. Some of these voices, like parents and teachers, are obviously especially important when we're children, right? At that stage of our development, we need that external guidance. And that's also true for us as adults. There are always gaps in our knowledge and our experience. We need the humility to listen and to learn to the wisdom of others. But relying on external voices for too long can also become problematic because no one else knows what is truly good and right and best for you. No one. As much as they may love you, as much as they may want the best for you, no one knows what is truly best for you. So if we don't graduate from depending on the voice and the opinions of others, we don't discover who we truly are, what truly matters to us. We never really claim the wisdom and the authority that God has given us. When we do graduate from the voice of outsiders, we usually then turn to what I'm calling today the voice of the conditioned self. This is our individual, independent voice. This is the voice that tells you what you need to do, what you need, what you want, what is good, what is not good, how you can achieve your goals. And I want to suggest that it's important that we listen to this voice too. This is the voice that gets things done. We all have natural wisdom. We've all been given gifts and capacities that enable us to make a contribution to the world. I think of someone like Steve Jobs, created Apple, Walt Disney, just the 2 first examples that came to my mind. They both created something significant, partly because they trusted in their own voice, their own ideas, their own vision. They listened to it, they followed it. Now, I said that it's our voice, but that's not entirely accurate because this voice that we hear that sounds like our voice is always conditioned in some ways by our past experiences. What we think has usually been influenced by our past hurts, our fears, our failures, the roles that we have played, the expectations that have been put on us. So, in other words, our voice always has its own agenda. And it's usually the agenda of our ego, yeah? Not our deeper, truer self. And the issue is that this agenda often prevents us from opening up to a bigger world, to other possibilities in our life, to other truth, to a whole different reality because we're so stuck in our own agenda, our own voice, our own world. So, our own voice is also limited. Yes, it can help us to succeed in some aspects of our life, but it isn't free enough, it isn't wise enough to show us how we can become whole, how we can become truly happy. There's no shortage of examples of people that have really relied on their own voice, done extraordinary things in their life, but yet been absolutely miserable. The third voice is what I'm going to call tonight the voice of soul. This is that mysterious wisdom that comes from deep within us. And this is not just a Christian idea. Most religious traditions, schools of philosophy, psychology over the centuries have all referred in some way to this deeper voice. They just use different language. This is the voice that is unconditioned by your past. It's the voice that comes from what we might call your essence, your deepest, truest self, from God in you. This is the voice who knows who you really are, what's really most important to you. This is the voice that knows your potential and what contribution you can make in your life that really matters the most, that will really fill you with meaning, with energy, with life. This voice always wants the best for you, and it knows what the best is. Listen to the author from the Book of Wisdom talk about this voice in our first reading today. He says, I esteemed her, this voice of the soul, I esteemed her more than scepters and thrones. Compared with her, I held riches as nothing. I loved her more than health or beauty. I preferred her to the light. In her company, in the company of this voice of the soul, all good things came to me. At her hands, riches not to be numbered. This wise man knew the truth that we see in the lives of the prophets and the mystics and the saints over the centuries, that it's this voice that truly supercharges our life. This is our greatest wealth. This is the secret source to life. What I want to suggest tonight is that the spiritual journey in many ways is about becoming more attuned and more obedient to this third voice, the voice of soul, the voice of wisdom, the voice of the Spirit, the voice of God, whatever language you want to give to it. As Christians, we believe that we already have this voice. It's there. Anytime we want to, we can tune into it. But it seems to me that we tend to notice it the most when we are suffering, when we are experiencing discontent, when we have come to the end of our own voice and we're like, man, nothing's working, what's going on? That's when we tend to be most sensitive to this voice. I suspect that was the case with Sister Mary Teresa. You may know the story. She was a sister of Loreto, and she trained and worked as a teacher. Then she went on to be a school principal, and she was really good at her job. She was doing exactly what her religious congregation expected of her. She was faithfully living out her vocation as a sister, as a teacher, as a principal. She's doing all the things that she'd prepared for so long. Although I suspect that deep down something wasn't quite right. Anyway, one day she was on a train, and suddenly she hears this voice. Not audible, but this voice from deep within her. And the voice was kind of urging her, suggesting, encouraging her to leave everything that she'd worked for, leave it all behind. Everything, literally. And instead, to tend to the poor and the sick and the dying on the streets of Calcutta. And she said that she was certain it wasn't her voice, and it certainly wasn't the voice of others around her. She knew that was the voice, that was a calling from soul. She called it a call within a call. We all have heard lots about Mother Teresa, yeah? But what we may not appreciate when we think about her is the incredible courage and faith and trust it would have taken for her to leave behind everything she'd built up. Her work, her achievements, the approval she had from others, the influence, the comfort, to leave all of that behind and step into the unknown. Radical. That's sometimes what it takes to follow the voice of soul. It can, and often does, take us outside of our comfort zones, outside of those sort of places where we feel comfortable, familiar. And that's the place that the rich man in our gospel today just wasn't willing to go to. You see, just like Sister Mary Teresa, he was also doing all the right things. Yeah? He'd built a successful business. He was financially well off. And not only that, we learn that he was also following his religion perfectly. He was faithful to all the laws. But again, something within him wasn't quite right. So he approaches Jesus and he says, "What must I do?" You hear his language? What must I do? It's still all about him. It's like, what boxes do I need to tick? Just tell me what to do. But before Jesus answers his question, it says that he looks steadily at him and loves him. That is always the first word that comes from soul. It's a word of love. That's how you know it's coming from the soul. It's a word of acceptance. Until we receive that love from deep within us, it's hard to follow where the soul wants to lead us, yeah? Anyway, the dialogue goes on. The man confirms for Jesus, "Look, I've been doing it all perfectly since a young age, following all the laws, ticking all the boxes." And Jesus says, "Well, there's just one thing you've got to do." Let me paraphrase. He says, "You are lacking connection with the voice of your soul. You're too controlling of your own world, and so you cannot be open to God. So go and sell all your possessions and come and follow me." You see, for this particular guy, his external wealth was the great obstacle to the wealth within him. And so Jesus said, just let it go, so you can follow what really matters, what will really lead you to life, what will really bring the best out of you. This passage today talks a lot about money, but I want to suggest it's not really about money. It's about putting a priority on tuning into the voice from deep within and being open to following that path that matters most to your soul. Trusting that when you do that, that is the best thing you can do for the world. Not meeting the expectations of everyone else, but following the path that the Spirit reveals to you. And that usually requires us to let go of some things. For some of us, it might be, like the rich man, letting go of some financial gain, maybe. For some of us, it might mean letting go of trying to meet the expectations of others constantly. Have you ever found yourself doing that? Or trying to kind of meet your own expectations, or the plans that you've developed. Or maybe it might mean dropping some of the things that we've been working on for so long. This was all a little bit too much for the rich man. Letting go of the small, controlled world that he'd created for himself was just too scary. He didn't have that kind of faith, and at least he was honest about it. He didn't pretend. He didn't say, "Oh, yeah, okay, I'll follow you, Jesus, no worries." He said, "I can't do it." And the scripture says that he walked away from that encounter with Jesus sad. But I hope for him that one day that discontent he was experiencing, that sadness, sort of motivated him to finally take that step, that leap of faith, and to pursue that deep calling of God, whatever that was. Okay, I'm going to land the plane now. It can take time to learn how to tune into this voice, yeah? Sometimes it can be confusing, can't it? It's like, what's my voice? What's God's voice? And it can help to have someone to guide you, a spiritual director, someone sort of advanced in the spiritual life. But what is absolutely necessary is that we take time to listen out for it as often as we can, and ideally every day. You see, the voice of God, it operates at a different frequency to all the other voices. So unless we carve out time to listen to it, it'll just get drowned out. by the multitude of voices in our lives. This is what prayer is supposed to be about. Prayer is about tuning out of our own voice and the voice of others so that we can tune into the voice that is constantly loving us and leading us along our own unique path towards abundant life.